Miami Children's Museum's quarterly conversation. This quarter, we are conversing about playing pretend theater and its impact on children. Miami Children's Museum has been doing quarterly conversations for a few years now, and this is our 9th quarterly conversation, and we have covered topics ranging from health, mental health, physical health, and education and the environment and so many other topics. And today we're excited to discuss one that is super close to my heart. My name is Bree-Anna Obst, and I am the Associate Director of Theatre, Education and Arts here at Miami Children's Museum, and have had a career, I guess, for about the last over 20 years, working with children and theatre, either with them or for them. So, like I said, a topic that's very close to my heart. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest today. Usually we have had a panel of people to discuss topics, but when we decided on this topic at Miami Children's Museum, I knew exactly who to call. And it is this wonderful human being that I'm going to spotlight. Here she is, Sue Giles. Sue is a freelance director. She is an expert in theater and performance for children and is the president of the International Association of Theater for Children and Young People, otherwise known as ASSETEJ. So Sue is also zooming in very early in the morning from Australia. Sue, welcome to Miami Children's Museum and our quarterly conversation.
Thank you so much, and it is wonderful to be here. Is that my cue to begin, Bree-Anna?
That's your cue. I know that you want to do your, I know, and start. Yes.
And start, thanks.
Start.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I would like to begin by acknowledging the country that I am on, which is the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. It's an incredible privilege to be able to create art, to think about play and children and families on this land where people have created art and been part of life and loving for thousands of years. As Bree said, I'm a freelance director, but for the last 22 years, from 2000 to 2022, I was the artistic director of Polyglot Theatre, and I was able to then, as my role as artistic director, to dive deeply across those 22 years into the interrogation of power and the child and participation and play. And when I talk about children, I'm ranging in my mind and my experience across all the ages from birth to 12. And this is my area of work and the focus of my advocacy. ASSETEJ, as the president of ASSETEJ, it's been an incredible adventure to see the global perspective on children, on childhood, and the theatre and performance that's created for, with, and by them. So I'm drawing on all sorts of influences today, and but I would like to just say that one of my big influences for this particular talk is the questions that you've sent in. So I've constructed my talk around 3 of those questions in particular, not to answer those questions, but using them as provocations, as springboards to my thoughts today. Okay, let us begin. So the first question I'm going to dive into is, there was a question about ways to incorporate more theatre and pretend play into everyday play. Even that has a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about, but what I'm diving into is what is it that theatre and role play does that other play doesn't? And I want to go straight to baby theatre. Baby theatre, or theatre for the very youngest, pre-walking children, is opening up the idea of theatre to minds that have not received the information of a theatre goer. Any first time is really important, but for a baby audience, the adult can't be in the position of teacher, as the baby's reception of information is different. With a baby, we're looking at a whole body and mind experience. Sensory engagement through hand, feet, noses, eyes, ears, all the synapses firing, curious as small scientists. Babies are creating the world for themselves as they move through it. They're inventing the world. Bree, I wonder if you could give us the first slide so we can have a little look.
Yes, I certainly can. Give me
Thank
one
you.
moment to bring that up. I'll make sure that the slide is going. Perfect. And then I will share that with everybody. Okay, can we all see that? No, something else?
No.
Give me one. Wrong screen. Desktop 2. Here we
Don't
go.
worry too much, Bree-Anna. I can just, oh, here we go. Got it.
There we go. Yep.
Perfect. Right. So the impact of theatre and live performance on pre-walking babies is real and profound, proving, if we need proof, that the youngest of us receives and responds to the ritual, the changes in atmosphere, and the drama of the theatre shape. Impact is noticeable: interest, curiosity, reaction, focus, desire to touch and feel and get closer. Can I have the second slide, please, Bree?
Mm-hmm.
The shape of theatre doesn't need to conform to an audience who watches as spectators either. And through baby theatre, we can see how the effect of immersive works that invite the child to engage and move and explore are the ones that involve them most deeply and allow each individual to pursue what interests them most through these active receptors of hand, feet, mouth, noses, eyes, and ears. How closed have we become as adults when we see babies interacting with the theatre that they experience? Thanks, Bree. Play and theatre work together to seek out the inner world of the child. Play comes in several shapes and sizes, so many shapes and sizes, from structured and organised play like games or board games even, but actual sort of physical games, to secret play and sometimes dark play. It's freewheeling and chaotic. It can be full of rules and it can feel terribly real. Play, pretend or make-believe, is the expertise of the child and illustrates the power of imagination and the often blurred line for children between what is real and what is not. This also means that children have easy entry into the liminal space of theatre. In the Laws, Plato wrote about play as a sort of anticipatory socialization, that children have certain natural modes of play which they discover for themselves. Plato's fear was that unless the play of children was regulated and contained, it threatened the stability of the state. Not that unregulated play would lead to violence, but if the children changed the rules of their games, they might, when adults, attempt to change institutions and laws. To many, children embody mayhem, rebellion, and pandemonium. Public space is guarded and hedged about by structures and rules that inhibit the child from freedom within that space, often because of commercialization and privatization. For their own safety, they are controlled and forbidden. Liability and litigation has changed the way we see people in public spaces. In child-led practice, we often find ourselves exploring instinctual subversion. The child is often the person who breaks rules without knowing it because they don't know the rules. And the variety of ways that the child explores doesn't stop after babyhood. This goes for the rules of theatre too. When small children are introduced to theatre, they will talk about what they see. They will work their whole body in response. They will wish to stand and join, and they will say out loud when they're bored. So how can we learn from children in this? I've sprung to my second question here. The second question was how to inspire adults to play. What prompts, and design elements deepen engagement in a theatre exhibit? I used this to spring into the idea about how children lead. Desire lines. Desire lines is something that I've based a lot of my work in my career on. And this is an architectural term for the path that people make between point A and point B. The track that cuts through the grass, that cuts corners. The child's, do you know what I mean? So it's, yes, when you have a nice piece of grass that you've planned, and then adults will always find that little sheep track across one corner of it. It's designers hate it. It's one of those things that happens. But it's really telling, because the adult will do that, and we will do that. And it's a way for us to make our own mark on the world. But the child's desire lines are totally different, because the child has a different relationship to point A and point B. They probably don't even know what these are. They have a different idea of purpose and of space. And when let loose in a public space, children will cover the ground in more ways than we can imagine, and every individual path demonstrates another point of view. By offering the desire line of the child free rein, we can see the individuality of each person, no matter the age. Choice becomes visible, and perhaps even choices or moments of delight that are completely unexpected to their adult. The adult, who is the gatekeeper of the child, can see and witness and appreciate the child's innate skill and desire. The child can be seen as active and capable, as inventive, brave and resilient, as sensitive and open. And often these observations are against the preconceived and strongly held views of the adults around them. One of the exercises that I love to do with my children has been to, when we are in the car and we're driving home, if I've picked them up when they were little, I'd ask them to show me the way home, to give me the directions to go home. And so I'd be driving the car and the kids will go, turn left. I go, oh, my whole body's going, I don't want to turn left. And they have to turn left because that's the instruction. And so turn right. And no, it's not that way. My whole inner self as an adult is going, that is not the way home. But it was a really interesting exercise, because I realized, and we all do as adults, sometimes we come up against what we know is right and true and the correct way to do things. And when a child pushes us in another direction, we fight against it. There's a capacity for divergent thinking that comes with childhood. Solutions to a problem are infinite because there's little regard for what's possible or not. Children are less hemmed in by reality. Divergent thinking demonstrates that children are more flexible in their thinking. Their neural pathways are not hardened. As adults, we can sometimes achieve close to this in brainstorming exercise or mind mapping, but we have to force ourselves to think outside the box, whereas children naturally do this. And when working in child-led practice, we find out what works and what doesn't very quickly. Children's capacity to explore thoroughly and fast is wonderful to observe. Something you think would be fascinating is rejected, while something you think is completely ordinary can be gleefully seized upon and played with for ages. I've learned never to draw a line under what I think children will choose or do, never to make up my mind about this is who they are. And flux is a natural state for children. Unlearning and feeling adrift for adults is part of how following children's desire lines works. And this is when new learning enters. In following desire lines, listening and hearing is important. Time is important. Time for a young person to form the ideas they're struggling to express and not jumping in to finish their sentences. Privacy is important. Design and character, time and privacy all contribute to a child's sense of authentic attention. And there's nothing more satisfying for a young person than to be given value as an expert. Authentic play is hard work for adults. We don't have it instinctively anymore, and yet it's the source of all scientific theory, all exploration in any field. Creative play and pretend is central to how we make discoveries. Theatre can allow us the connection point to pretend and give us a place to imagine. And I'm going to spring now into the last question that I responded to, which is question number 8. Disney, evil or necessary evil as a gateway drug to theatre? I found this entirely fascinating and great. And again, not to answer directly, who can? But I'm going to just talk about this. So what does Disney do? It tells us stories that have moral questions at their heart, tells a story that has a happy ending, shows a world where confusion is cleared away, where good triumphs, where courage and people who dare to dream win, where villains are vanquished, or in the more recent ones, made to see the error of their ways. What's perhaps missing from Disney, and indeed a lot of theatre made for children, is the open-ended questions, the doubt, and the room for wonder. Wonder as in, I wonder. We are rarely left in doubt about what is being said in Disney films. People speak their minds out loud. Their thoughts are shared with great articulation and with every question answered. We know what the problem is, and then we watch as the characters solve it. Live theatre is impactful in ways that go beyond the brain and into our physical and emotional selves. By embodying story, by bringing it to a live audience, we're showing that humans really do feel and think and behave in ways that we recognise. The relationship and energy exchange between performer and audience is very powerful. It's not safe in the way a screen is. Human-to-human exchange is the biggest risk we can take in our lives. A child invests in the theatre performance in a way that is beyond an adult analytical response. Even when the theatre takes over and adults also lose themselves, they know in part of themselves how to process and know for sure it's not real. Can and does a child process in the same way? No, I don't think they do. The investment is often much, much more, a stronger investment of belief. The processing is also different. And this is where the adult is worried and reluctant to take the risk of exposing children to ideas they might not be able to handle. We know our children. That's our main focus when we have them as parents and when we are teachers. We know our class. And yet, when the child is with an alien in the family or classroom structure, and this is where artists sit sometimes, other elements and factors in that child will appear. Other people will see different parts of children that they don't share with their family. The family language and the classroom language is set pretty quickly. We know from our own memories of being a child that what we said or did within our own family circle was not everything we were. We know what our secret lives might have been. The secret part of a child is their inner world, and no one has a right to know what goes on in there. As adults working with children, we can trust that inner world. We must trust it. And this will allow that child to experience what they see and feel in ways that mean something to them. There is no one response for children. There is no en masse understanding of children as a block that's true. The individuality of the child persona is not placed as a vital part of their learning in education systems. We know this because the ratios make this impossible. The task given to teachers in education systems makes this impossible. We can do a little bit of that, but we can never allow that child to be thoroughly individual. Where is the child's resilience in this? What can we do to acknowledge the child's strength in understanding what they've seen in different ways? I'm coming back to theatre, of course, here. The impact of a piece of theatre is sometimes felt weeks and months after the event. A child watched a paper elephant. It was a human being dressed in paper as an elephant who was sad and angry. It was a very short exploration piece about about tantrums, about meltdowns, and what it feels like to be inside a tantrum. And the child was watching the paper elephant and was scared by it and had to leave the room. And then the parent sent me a text message with a video of this child, and her play for weeks after this event was being the paper elephant. And she would dress herself in her mother's yoga mat and play out the elephant. She loved that experience, but she was also scared by it. The child who was in a play that we did with an Indonesian company that was an immersive piece about a boatload of refugees coming to Australia. It was for very young children and their parents. This child was 3. And inside that work, afterwards, she said, it made my bones stronger. She felt it. She embodied it. Oh, thanks, Bree-Anna. How nice of you to send that. Can you go to the one after that as well, which is, I think, the last image when they're being picked up by the helicopter here? It was a very strong piece, and the children were anything from 3 to 7 years old. We have a tendency to ask children immediately what they thought of a show. Did you like it? What was your favourite part? And instead, can we allow children to have space and time to think and feel, let images drift and return, let feelings emerge? Trusting the child in this is something that can feel like bad parenting or bad teaching. Trusting that this small human has felt, has experienced, and has opinions on all of this, but not demanding to know what they are. Being with the child as an equal in the experience can allow for the adult to find for themselves the unexpected path or the pearl of a moment that they haven't found before. Because outcome is so important to adults, this practice of following the desire lines of children draws the artist into uncomfortable areas, places that feel out of control, elusive and vague. And it's in the moments of chaos that creates that anything might happen. We must give over control, and this is dangerous stuff for artists. It challenges the artistic intention and demands that change is built into the expectations of everyone. The difference in the adult desire line and the child's is exciting as a theatre maker, something to play with, to use as a way of bringing these disparate cultures of adult and child together in one shared experience that means something to both. And the issue of control is vital because the opportunity to hand it over might result in something wonderful. Relinquishing control can happen in many ways. For the artist, it can be about opening up of ideas, not feeling threatened by a change of plan or if ideas don't take. It's about chaos in the room, the ability to sit within the whirlwind and not be flustered, but allow patterns to emerge and children to make their own need for order apparent. It's about not needing I'm right and you're wrong, about dropping the education paradigm of teacher-learner and being able to shift roles. It's also about allowing the goalposts to move. You could call it letting go, relate it to jumping off the cliff or walking blindfold. It contains risk, danger, and possibility, making mistakes, experiencing disasters. It's exhilarating and challenging, with moments of despair and humiliation, hilarity, and moments of ecstasy. And art is, after all, one of the ways in which to understand or attempt to understand the complex and torturous pathways humanity takes in its existence. With design, artistic intention, dramaturgy, rigour in experimentation, risk and play and story, these are all part of the strong frame we need when we offer free choice. The ritual, the liminal and the sacred are all held with theatre, and what this offers within playful happenings pours sunlight and water on the imagination of the child and their inner world. I've done some free ranging here, so I've come to the end of that and now would love to
Yeah.
open up for conversation.
Yeah. So thank you, Sue. A lot to take in there. Um, I wanted to, if people have any questions for Sue, I know that a couple people had pre-registered some questions about theater exhibit design. And I know someone here is also asking that question. And so just a question for you, Sue, is if someone is making a theater exhibit and maybe Melissa there, if you can talk about what your theater exhibit actually looks like now. What are some suggestions that you can offer, Sue, to help stimulate that trust, to help stimulate the adults letting go and the children having control in a theater exhibit space? And maybe this can also translate into other, general kind of museum exhibit spaces where there's a supermarket or a fire station. But let's begin specifically with the theater kind of exhibit.
So yeah, we are redoing our theater exhibit. We're in the process of hopefully getting that renovated in the new year. Right now, it's the only really like interactive spaces that we have is, we do have a stage, we do have some floor seating for any, caregivers or any other children that are sitting and watching whatever performances are happening on stage. There is a bit of like a soundboard interaction backstage. With the new design, we're bringing in some like shadow puppet areas. We have the ability for kids to interact with like their own theater poster where they kind of can stand in the poster and be like the star of the show. We're also hoping to find different ways to bring the community in whenever we do open this exhibit, whether it's partnering with local community theaters and whatnot. I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add, but I did have just like a question about play and child-led play from what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Melissa, did you involve children in the ideas around that exhibit?
I do believe that over the last year or so, or probably even longer than that, we've taken various feedback and whatnot from children as well as, caregivers, and just have watched the way that they've interacted with that space and just tried to think of just like different ways to, add with that interaction.
Yeah, great. Because it's the Children's Museum here in Melbourne. We worked really closely with them to engage, especially because it was very young children who were involved, engage the children in that explorative work around how they move through space and what the levels even of perception and the levels of engagement and what people find fascinating. And sometimes kids will find just like a corner of a stone fascinating, or stairs, or the actual architecture itself can be just something that's really intriguing. So yeah, interesting to just, the observation is exactly right, just seeing how people move through space. What was your particular question though?
Yes, you were talking about child-led play and how sometimes we as adults have the instinct to want to correct the way that they're playing based on interactions that we have as an adults and knowing how like the real world works. One of our values here at our museum is through play in the exhibits, teaching children like about the real world, and for these exhibits to be like a reflection of how things work in the real world. It just, I don't know, it sparked a question or curiosity of how do you find that balance of trying to teach children about the real world, as they grow older and they age, but also, still valuing, thinking outside of the box, I guess is what my question is.
Yeah, it's a big question, because that's the paradigm that we're in, isn't it? we're in the position, especially in museums are a place of learning, but exploration too, I would say. And it comes down to me about what the desire is for that child to have their own power, and also for that child to also then be part of that conversation. How deeply invested are we in children being part of society as contributors to society? And if that's the case, then what are the mechanisms we can put in place to hear them, to listen to them, and to get their opinions on things like, from anything from civics to history to anything of that. They've got opinions on, and they've got a place in the world around that because they're deeply affected by this stuff. So that's the thing. I think that it's the paradigm shift around that, and you can find small ways to kind of eat away at that paradigm if you're interested, to allow them places where they can reinvent what is real, or have a response to the exhibit that gives their own sense of reality really strongly. So how I, as a child, fit into this is very different to how you, as an adult, think I should fit into this. Does that make sense?
That does. That's very
it might
helpful.
be just like every now and then a little door opener will allow that paradigm to be questioned, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm getting at is that out of that is not forcing those learned experiences onto children, but finding ways to just naturally bring up those conversations. So that's great.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Sue, I was going to say on that of like inviting the play in exhibits. So, here at Miami Children's Museum, most children's museums, we have our frontline staff, and they're our team who are on the floor engaging with the guests and the kids. Sometimes they're doing logistical things like literally like tidying up an exhibit, but also their main role is to be there and present with the kids. What are ways, if I'm just an employee strolling on the museum floor, can I help engage in that play, that child-led play, and opening that trust in that child, but I still want to have that interaction? What are ways that we can either incite the play or enter into it with them?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because one of the things I did as a parent when taking the kids to an art gallery or an art museum was, because they can be very dull places and the pictures are very high, but I would give them something to find, just that thing about going, where's the man playing the violin, and so there's a secret sort of adventure game that gets created. So those sorts of structured play things can happen. Where are the human teeth? Where's the blue flower? Where's the footprint of the Neanderthal? I don't know what your exhibits look like. This is kind of hilarious. I'm riffing on things I don't know, but
it's
so
perfect. Just to see, you might inspire a whole new exhibit.
It's the human teeth exhibit. So finding out what fascinates, like there's something about, given the task is exciting for a kid. We all know that sometimes to be given a role, given a job, or given a task is actually a really neat way to kind of get into exploration. And the other way would be simply to be able to be with, and exactly this following stuff, be with that child and be with them. You could just be sitting and seeing what they're seeing, and then asking like real genuine curiosity for yourself as a person, going, what are you thinking about that? Not leading that conversation or leading where they're looking, but actually being there to be part of a conversation about what's happening rather than being the instructor. And that's the playful sort of attitude, isn't it? And so your people on the ground will get into conversations with kids that could be, again, freewheeling and slightly chaotic and fabulous, and that child will remember that relationship with that adult really strongly, and that creates a kind of a link, because it's playful. It is good playful conversations that don't have to be on topic, are the only way really to engage in that.
Yeah, so sort of like entering a conversation with a question or a curiosity about what they're already doing.
What they're already engaged in. Yeah, that's right.
And also, that planting of the seed of a challenge. We circle our museums exhibits all the time, so we perhaps see things that haven't been seen by the child. So inviting that challenge, or I was just thinking about, most children's museum had the supermarket exhibit, and if you went up to a child with a potato or something, you could pick up and just be like, I need to purchase this. Do you know where I can check out? And then that could invite, them wanting to either help with the checkout or point you in the right direction.
Be the checkout chick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so Australian of you, the checkout chick.
Yeah. So these
the cashier.
The cashier. The supermarket exhibit, is that like a untouchable, feelable thing? Like these are all immersive installations, basically.
Yeah, they're
right.
Yep.
Cool.
So
perfect places to play and pretend. That's incredible.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I know there was a raised hand. I think it was actually from the theater team here at Children's Museum. Do you guys still have a question? I saw your hand go up.
So, hi, we really enjoyed listening to everything you were sharing, and it was very insightful. And something that really stood out to me was what you said about, and Jess as well. My name's Therese, by the way.
Hi.
Hi. When you were saying how we have a tendency to immediately ask the child after a performance, like, did you like it? Like, what did you think? And I'm curious to know if you have any suggestions for alternatives, like perhaps how did it make you feel, or things like that, to ask the audience of children after a show. Thought-provoking questions, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, look, it's again, it's one of those things we do, isn't it? Like you want to know, and so, and often we ask adults the same. And when you think about, when you go to see a piece of theatre, I often can't make up my mind what I've seen, and I need time to cogitate and think about it. But we slam down kids' throats and go, write an essay now. So I think you're right. Like there's something about what you notice or what you remember that might be a good thing. Like what are the sort of big images, like not what your favorite bit is, because that's very leading, but more about what is it that you saw, what is it that you felt, like what did you feel, I think is a beautiful one, because that opens people up and breaks people open a little. But for little children especially, what you saw, and what did you notice, can sometimes be the first trigger. So that sort of visual, or what do they touch? Maybe go into the sensory stuff as well for very small ones, because sometimes it's hard to name feelings as well, isn't it? Like we don't have the language as a very young person to be able to talk about this. And this is where drawing comes in. Drawing's brilliant because you can just sit down and draw a big, huge piece of paper, and everyone draw what they got, what they saw, what they noticed, or whatever. I did this recently, big piece of paper after children had seen 3 different works, and then we just drew what came out of that, and people put in, and when they're drawing, they can then talk about what that is, and then the story gets bigger. So you can say, tell me about this, and what's the story of this, and then they can start to talk about what they see or what they remember as well. So the drawing's really cool, and you can do it really roughly, and I'll have big pieces of paper where everyone's sharing it, because then all the thoughts get put down and all the thoughts are kind of explored within that audience as well. And the other thing is, sometimes privacy is really awesome, because the child will pick up on what other people are saying all the time. And so peer pressure, I suppose, but also peer learning is important. But peer pressure is huge, and they like to say what they think the adult would like them to say. So their expectations are already really in place, that they need to please people, they need to give the correct answer. And to try and break away from that expectation is one of the biggest challenges in getting feedback. It's why often feedback with children directly doesn't work very well, because it's one word, or it's yep or good or whatever. So trying to get to the place where they are feeling like they are leading the conversation again is it takes time. Like could be one-on-one, but that's when you get the authentic responses to stuff. We know that when we ask in groups, everyone, when you ask a kid, somebody will give an answer and every other child will have that same answer because they've heard from that person, and that's correct. So this whole idea of getting right and wrong is a huge part of that feedback response stuff. And so we need to be really wary of that as a beginning point.
Great. Thank you, Sue. And yeah, I think it's about also like, providing that space and that opportunity for reflection. You know, sometimes we want or need something for like to sign off on a grant or something almost immediate, right? So how do we provide that, whether it's, you know, maybe it's a table to the side where they can have a paper and say, draw what you just saw or something, you know, as well as, you know, obviously creating that space. Like sometimes you said, like the kid with the elephants, like that reflection and that impact of that moment and the theater happened much later. So
there's a slide in there in that I didn't show all the images because it's just, but there's a project that we made called Voice Lab, which was about private space for kids, and it was children who went into a little tent. I think you've got it on the last.
I saw it.
That one. Yeah. That one. So they go in and they put on these headphones and they're being talked to by an AI character called Voice Lab, who is ignorant and doesn't know anything, and so can ask them all the questions and the child will respond. Because they're by themselves, they're in a private space, they respond with incredible depth, incredible articulation, and go deeply into what interests them. It's the most successful way we've discovered to a polyglot to get reflection, to get real reflection from children. And this works from children from 3 to 18. You know, it's everyone just desires that private space, and to be talked to inside your ears is a really personal thing. So you respond authentically and you respond with a great deal of clarity. So private space is really fascinating. If there were ways for museums to set this up it's easy, you know, with a kind of video but having the headphones and the binaural questions is actually kind of impactful. And that's where theatre comes in too. They believe in a character that needs help. And so they are helping Voice Lab find out about the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great project there. So we just had questions, Sue, in the chat, or I think it just came to me, but here we are. It says, we are opening a shadow theater very soon, a first theater for us. The idea is for kids and their grown-ups to be the actors and the audience. Are there any recommendations for staffing this theater for interacting with the kids who maybe don't know how to start?
Yes. Shadows.
Yes,
fabulous.
my question first, Kristen, is, are the shadow puppets already there, or are people creating the shadow puppets?
Both. So
okay.
You know, we are planning to have sort of like at one of the entry tables, a place for people to build their own puppets, and maybe some with like the Brad puppets, you know, that can move. But also that some of the scrims and things would have pre-planned set pieces.
Okay.
Cool.
Great. So Sue, go for it.
Kristen, is there a place for people to use their bodies as shadows as well?
I think so. So we haven't started the install or anything like that yet. So I know that was a part of the plan. I'm not sure if it's made it into the full plan yet, or if it's just going to be a smaller set.
Yeah. This is it's one of my favorite forms. I just think it's incredibly playful and wonderful. And it's really interesting too. So for very little children, the moment, like this is what I think, asking about human body shapes, because that's the physical play that happens through that, and the kind of ease of getting into making works and making shows for each other is really great when the audience can see the effect of the child's body on stage, if you like.
Mhm.
But it's such a safe way to do it because you're not seen, so that's really awesome. So one of the questions I had would be about what the technology is, I suppose. I mean, one of my favorite ones is using the old overhead projectors,
Mhm.
because you can use the landscape space as well as and it's really usable for very young children as well.
Mhm.
And whether it's possible to have one section that's just completely freewheeling, that's possible for people to just to be managing every single part of it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got all the everything covered. But yeah, the opportunity to make is a really important part of this too. But
Great.
also one of the things might be about the artists or the facilitators working with this installation. One of the things that's really useful is sound effects and music and sounds. So when people are starting to put little acts together, either encouraging them to use their vocal sounds or somebody who can work with them to make the sounds of and they'll make their own voices as well, but to also be able to put music behind something or to have instruments there that people can play with to kind of deepen that experience as well. It's a really great way to get that non-verbal work happening. So they're focusing on the shapes they're making rather than the text, you know, when kids just go blah 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 blah. So it's just a broader exploration if you can kind of bring sound into that too, I reckon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sue, for that. Yeah, sound is a big part of the shadow play. And we've done a lot of like body shadow play here at Miami Children's Museum as well. It's kids find it hilarious with what their shadows actually can look like and what they can do.
It's so interesting to see when kids clock it's them. Like it's not till they're 4 or 5 or even 5 that they can go, oh, that's me. I'm making that shape. Because it's like a complete disconnect. And you can see it with young people who are disabled as well. There's a different cognitive recognition of what is happening that's really interesting in that shadow play too.
Yeah, great. We have just about 5 minutes left. So if anyone is desperate to ask another question, feel free, pop it in the chat or raise your hand. While we wait for that, we did have the question of the impact of pretend play specifically in early childhood. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, or we can also invite our guests here to touch on that as well, what they think the impact is, particularly in early childhood. Because you talked earlier about on babies and that idea of the first experience, right? Here at Miami Children's Museum, we like to say we are, we can give that first experience to arts. We can give that first experience to performing arts, the first experience into museum exploration, right? Come to here first before you grow up and go off to a science museum and so forth. So that was a nice touch that you were saying, that being that first experience. But why is it important, and what is that impact of having those early childhood experiences, like either seeing theater or being a part of a theatrical experience?
I just got distracted by the chat question. So the the impact of so for very young, it's one of the most important things, I think, because it is the area of expertise. It's where what I'm interested in is that blurred line between reality and not reality, and how close that is for kids, especially very young. The real and the not real don't make, there's no distinction sometimes, and we know that to be true just in play. And when I would like thinking back into our own memories about what the big moments were for us, and whether the stories you remember as a 5-year-old and thinking back to when you were 5, where you lived, like really going back into that memory a really fantastic way to encounter the child that you were and how you thought. And so having a think about what you were like as an adult back in when you were 5 years old, what were the big turning point moments? What were the huge things that you will never forget? And also, what did you play? Where did you play? What was your what did you invest in? I was deeply involved in tiny little houses under bushes that I made with little toys, and I made fairy gardens, and I would play by myself for hours and hours and hours and come back to them day after day after day. I know that the tree across the road was a giant. We called him Strongman, and he held up the world. And so things like that that you remember when you were young, you know that they are as real as dinner with your family. And when you're having dinner with your family, you can be in fantasy land at the same time. Your mashed potato will become that mountain. So that's a thing to really explore as people who are bringing theatre into this and play into this scenario, is that it can feel really real, and that's the exciting part of it. Does that say anything? Did I answer anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you definitely did it. It's because, you know, as we get older, theater is just, it's a very separate thing. And as a kid, you know, it like you said, theater is, and play and real life are all just
They're just a
here,
messy group of
messy things.
friends. That's what they are.
Yeah. And
They're friends.
so, you know, we lose that, you know, as we get older. And so, you know, I think it's really important that, like, to remember that, like, I think as adults we need that, and we don't often have that opportunity, except if you're an artist or in the theater world, to have that pretend and have those lines blurred and that play. And so, yeah, I mean, the impact of theater on kids is huge, and
And joining them is hard. It really is. It's
yeah.
joining them in that authentic play is really difficult. We can't do it very easily as adults. We get bored, we get fidgety, we get embarrassed, we get, you know, you try and play along with your child and you run out of steam. It's really hard work. So finding the ways to engage authentically is one of the keys, really, to really enjoy it is quite difficult. So
just yeah, there's that one question there, the best way to move from like that play into something more concrete, like a script, you know,
like a
la, like, you know, a theater camp or a theater workshop kind of thing.
Yeah, look, again, I'd go towards the child-led experience as well. There's a brilliant company here in Melbourne called House of Muchness, and they work with kids on agency, basically. And so and children are and especially when they're getting towards teen years, but anytime from 8 or 9, they're really keen to make shows, like we all did when we were kids as well. We love making shows and love having lines to learn and all the rest of it. But having them really understand what it is that a play can be is kind of one thing. It doesn't have to be text, and it doesn't have to be in front of a watching audience. So what is it that theatre can be? But also the second one is get the kid, if the kids are involved in creating that work, then that structure comes in really quickly and really easily. And it's really, again, a chance to involve them in the creation of the work, and therefore their sort of authentic engagement in that work will be much easier as well. But you know, I would just say that as soon as we start putting text into in the kind of play structure, someone's going to miss out. So that's another thing as well. Like it becomes competitive, and it becomes who's got the most lines, and do we have auditions, and that sort of that edge of theatre that's quite unpleasant comes into it quite quickly.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, that there were a lot of questions. I know we have to wrap up, but I wanted to say there were a lot of questions about, like, you know, making a theater program in your museum and so forth. And I will say that to bring that child-led experience into your adult theater process is really important. And we've done it, you know, here at Miami Children's Museum. is once we knew we had to make a play about trains, because we had a Thomas the Tank Engine exhibit, and we can't do a Thomas the Train play because we don't have the rights to be doing a Thomas the Train play. We just know the topic is trains. And so exactly what Sue said, we had like big butcher paper, making drawings. Everyone had little pieces of paper, and we would just like, where are you going on a train adventure? You can go anywhere. And they would draw a picture of it, and we would take that little adventure with them in the creating stage, having kids present in the initial stages, you know. And then basically we took like all these different little vignettes of scenes that happened with the kids as we played and workshopped with them about a train journey. And then we ourselves, because we were the grown-ups then making a play to perform for our children and museum guests, took all their ideas, we stole them basically, thank you kids, and created this wild train adventure that went all over the place, to an island of lunch, to the supermarket, to a tunnel that had a T-Rex with short arms. It was incredible. And that, what I will say, like if people are thinking about starting out a theater troupe at their museums, is in the beginning, use the kids. You have a natural creative resource right there at your fingertips. And so doing workshops with kids to help you create work that ends up being for them is a really like important part of the theater creating process. And I know at Polyglot that, you know, that when so a connection for Sue and I is that Sue was a director of mine when I was an artist at Polyglot, and kids were heavily involved in the process, and that has affected my practice now, you know, as a theater director and maker of theater for children, is having kids at the core of the process, because the play itself or the experience will end up being for them. So you need their input along the way. So thanks, Sue, for ingraining that in me.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we don't have any further questions, if there were questions that we left unanswered for the people in Zoom world, you can feel free, you know, to email or to follow up. You will be receiving a resource guide from this conversation. So any little tidbits or articles about theater and kids and things that Sue said will be compiled together in the next couple of weeks. And this conversation will also be available online on Miami Children's Museum's YouTube channel. Really thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Sue, for getting up. What is it now? It's 6 a.m. now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So Sue was starting this conversation at 5 a.m. So you look great for being
Thanks.
up so early.
The sun's risen. Huzzah.
And thank you everybody for joining us in our quarterly conversation, and stay tuned for more of these conversations every quarter on Zoom from Miami Children's Museum. And I hope you all have a lovely, wonderful day, and be in touch and continue these conversations beyond this Zoom and in your daily life, in your museums, in your interactions with your kids. Because as we all know, according to me and Sue, theater is real important for the kids. So thank you all very much.